We'll be back from the break. It's exactly 5 minutes. Smart means business. Amanji Ubariji. Now, the Transparency International Uganda released a report regarding the Corruption Perception Index, which clearly revealed that Uganda stagnated, scoring just 26%, and it seems to be like for the last 3 years, that has been the average score the country has been obtaining. But of course, as we still observed into the report, the East African region countries had the worst scores. And of course, there was the aspect of considering rankings, but that was a bit inappropriate, as the stakeholders say, let's consider the scores, because what's the use of you being the leader of your class and you only have 50%? So such of the perspectives we had to observe. Of course, in East Africa, we had the Somalia scoring 11, Democratic Republic of Congo at 20, seeing South Sudan at about 13% score. And that is not even above the sub-Saharan average of 33%. Tanzania tried a bit to beat the sub-Saharan average with 40%, but still not beating the global average of 43%. So what does that really indicate? Well, still it's revealed that for Uganda's case, we have the laws that can actually avert corruption. But the only challenge comes in, we don't have committed leaders to do that. Now, that's why I'm joined with the David Gizito. He's the Programs Officer, Transparency International Uganda, as we break down these matters. David, it's a pleasure to have you here. And we saw the report, and it was quite heartbreaking, you know.
Heartbreaking is a big word, but we can say the journey is still long.
It's still long.
I hope you are able to internalize the recently published, or we call it released, Corruption Perceptions Index. It's an annual report that ranks countries globally according to their perceived levels of corruption. And it's basically an expert opinion. And just for making clarity, the results don't reflect the opinions of Transparency International Uganda.
The results don't reflect.
We are not involved in any way in the data collection. For us, we just compile what's there, then calculate and come up with a score and a rank. So this year's perception index, like you highlighted, Uganda has not scored any better. We have just maintained the previous score, although we've been on a declining trajectory since 2021. Our prayers are that maybe we start performing better. Thank you.
Now, part of the issues that were highlighted out was issues to do with law enforcement agencies, weaknesses in the judiciary system, and political interference. And part of your recommendations was still about in ensuring that the justice system is independent. How do we see these recommendations? How are they going to work?
So basically, the CPI, of course, it's not so useful to come up with a report and you don't have recommendations.
Yeah.
Every year, we've always come up with specific recommendations that speak to the context. I remember there is a time we had COVID-19, and then our call was to make procurements more transparent. But also what has always come out clear is they need to have independence of the institutions that administer justice and that promote accountability. But also we previously were recommending the need to control lobbying activities, although we hadn't seen it so much in Uganda, but they are still lobbyists. I think last year we saw elements of the debate is still on. Money is ending up in programs such as coffee and things like that. Yes. So those are lobbyists that come up with either certain good programs and they think government should fund this program. But it's always a risk. You'll either gain or you lose. So one of the channels through which we've been losing money has been, those avenues of lobbying.
Yeah.
So back to this year's theme, we were looking at corruption and injustice.
Injustice, yes.
And looking at the entire globe, not only Uganda, we've seen that when it comes to fighting corruption, and especially prosecuting cases of corruption, there is a lapse between the cases reported and, the final result. So we don't see that output, we don't see the impact, we don't see that satisfaction in the courts of law that, the criminals are convicted to, to what would qualify to be satisfactory. So our call this year has been that we need to see more transparency in how, justice is administered. We need to see more independence and integrity in how these judicial systems operate. We need to see more coordination when it comes to enforcement of justice.
Enforcement of justice,
because sometimes we shall blame the courts of law, yet the entire chain when it comes to justice system, it's it's weak.
It's compromised.
Because we have criminal intelligence, we have the investigation arm, we have the prosecution arm. All these arms, if they don't work together in a more coordinated manner, we see that we can't achieve the results we intend to achieve. So basically, it's not limited to Uganda, even other countries, Kenya, everywhere. It's been the same. If you've been following the news when it comes to global trends, you can see that the UK has been having the same problems. When you go to the US, they are still struggling with, justice. I think we followed the conversation on the ex-president Trump, how they are trying to, make him not qualified to go to the next presidency. So those are all elements that have an interplay with the fight against corruption.
And now that's very interesting. Now that brings me back to the aspect of what Dr. Chris Beromusi, Minister for ICT, said that he doesn't feel that political interference is in any way contributing to this. Yes, he admits that there are weaknesses, but he doesn't point out a scenario. He says, what scenario do we have where where there has been political interference in corruption-related cases? Should we agree with that?
It's two-sided. With politics, it's like I don't know how I could term it. That long arm that will always beat you, but you never see it. It never touches you. So with politics, it's more like a ghost that is always haunting you, but you won't see or you won't touch this ghost. So the politicians will always come out clear and deny that there is no political interference. And clearly, from the normal eye or the normal lens, you won't see it. But behind the scenes, everything in this country and around the globe, everything is run by politics.
By politics, yeah.
Either you're implementing your political ideology or you're trying to protect, your own. So when it comes to the fight against corruption, in jurisdictions where we have those elements of dictatorial aspects, actually extreme dictatorial aspects,
yes,
you see that then the role of politicians when it comes to combating, it's kind of minimal because that arm is iron-handed. I think we remember during the times of President Amin that he was, the judge and the jury, whatever he says will pass. If you steal and he says you're going for, death row, that's it.
That's it.
So even other countries where you see those elements of, extreme leaderships, and these leaderships are willing to come out boldly and, speak out against corruption. I think it has worked. Now, looking at Uganda, we have elements of politicians that influence decisions.
Decisions, yes.
And these decisions will always go in their favor. As much as they don't come out clear and on any paper trail say that, we requested for this and this. But still we know that these decisions go in their favor. I'll give you a scan of the resources that were meant for Karamoja and they were distributed among the top politicians.
Exactly.
No politician among them made a formal request for any of these resources.
Actually, it's entirely true. It wasn't. It wasn't.
But all these resources ended up either in their homes, in their constituencies, or in their jurisdictions. You get it? So that's how far politics comes in. So if a politician then doesn't come out clearly to denounce some of these aspects, of course it will always happen that we don't have this political will. And political will is another thing. And as we debate, we want to see what's that interplay between, the political will and the fight against corruption. There is, I think, in Uganda, I won't speak for other countries, but in Uganda, I think we have a mismatch. And probably our politicians don't speak the same language. The president will tell you that our policy is zero tolerance to corruption. But it's really I don't know if I should say this. It's really embarrassing that even one of the ministers heading one of the agencies that fight corruption was also, within that bracket of the ministers that got a share of, of the items of the marginalized. So that's how bad it is that even in the top leadership, the real politicians don't speak the same language. I think if we don't get away from that way of doing business, we shall continue sinking in the fight against corruption.
Now, still in the political side, we've seen politicians that came out clearly and said they agreed and they are refunding these engines. So, in a country that has an operating law, was that? Do you think that was right?
I'll give you an example of UK, because this was a very glaring one. When UK passed COVID-19 guidelines and restrictions and all those,
yes,
one of them was that there wasn't supposed to be any gathering. Like parties and what. So the Prime Minister got involved in one of the gatherings. That's ex-Boris. And he was impeached.
Exactly.
Just because of something we may consider small. So that's how strict some of these issues are supposed to be. So if you're a top leader and you're involved in such a scandal, ideally you're supposed to step aside even as much as you're willing to, to refund or to recover what was misappropriated.
Okay.
But for our case, we see that, this long list, even up to now, we are still investigating. And chances are likely that we won't have a prosecution, we won't have a conviction. Why? Because none of this was involved in making the requisitions.
The requisitions, yeah.
It's the technical staff that were involved, unless they come out and testify. But of course, without evidence beyond reasonable doubt, nothing can happen. And the fight against corruption, you need to have evidence, pinning evidence. Without that, it becomes more of a hearsay.
So the political side, do we have pinning evidence?
It's in most cases, it's not there. That's why I said it's like a ghost that haunts you. They'll make the decisions, but you won't see any trail through which these decisions were made. So I think then what happens is that the top leadership, and that's now the office of the presidency, should come out, I think, to be more strict when it comes to how he handles the people under him. Because from the president, we will agree that he has tried to put in the institutions that are supposed to fight corruption.
Exactly.
We have so many, and we think they should be performing their mandate. But he has also tried to assent to the laws that we are supposed to be using in the fight against corruption. I think the most recently updated is the Leadership Code Act, where all the leaders are supposed to declare, their wealth.
Wealth, yes.
So in such a scenario where we believe the president is trying, because Uganda has assented to all the international laws that we have ratified to, including the UNCAC and most of its provisions. Currently, we've also passed the beneficial ownership law, which is also now a global standard. Even the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, we are part of it. So that shows that probably from the top, there's that element of willingness. But that hard-handedness to handle these few elements that are then sabotaging the fight, I think it's what has been lacking. As much as we have the agencies, we have the laws, but these persons involved are always let go very easily, and we think that shouldn't be the case. Everyone involved should set an example that the next appointment will always look at to say that if I'm a minister and I do this, maybe the results will be very, very terrible.
Very terrible. Interesting. Now, that brings me back to what they say, that we have the laws that combat corruption do exist, but we lack committed leadership to do that. That brings me back. You mentioned about the different corruption units that are formed. We have many, actually.
We have many.
In Uganda. But I want to understand, do you have a uniting framework? Is there a uniting framework that puts them all together, or each is working on their own? Because it doesn't really correlate, because that's already increased government expenditure by formulating those units. They have to pay staff, but results, the assessment. And part of what you suggested recommendations was monitoring systems.
So we have certain frameworks. Their effectiveness, it's something we can discuss later.
Okay.
So the government agencies, we call them the government accountability agencies, are coordinated under the Inter-Agency Forum.
Inter-Agency Forum, okay.
So currently it has over probably 10. Because the new entrant is the State House Investors Protection Unit.
Yes.
Headed by Afande Nakalema. And we believe if the coordination was to be as it should be, probably work would be moving faster, because there is always those elements of this call from someone, let this go and things like that. But when you're to fight corruption, because corruption is mainly fighting criminal gangs. A more syndicated, actually we call it organized, it's more organized crime.
Exactly.
With lots of syndicated, coordinations. So that means even anti-corruption agencies need to operate in a kind of organized syndicate system. So if someone is to call and say orders from above, I was giving this example, that if you know Afande Nakalema, it's very unlikely that you'll know Afande Isoke. But even if you know the two of them, at least you won't know Justice Abodo and you won't know Honorable Betty Kamia.
Yes.
So that means you'll make a call to the two, but these other ones won't agree. So when you have that coordination, it's very unlikely that most of these corruption cases will be let go very easily. But also, it avoids duplication. Because there is a time we had budget lines for capacity building, training and capacity building on corruption under the Office of the President, Directorate of Ethics and Integrity. You find the same line in the Office of the Inspectorate of Government. That's the IG. Then you have also other lines in the PPD and the rest. And we think if it's corruption, maybe among these agencies, let's have the DEI doing capacity building. Give them their budget and capacity building will be theirs.
Okay, yes.
Then when it comes to issues of reporting corruption, let maybe State House and Corruption Unit handle that. Because you put in place systems, toll-free lines and the rest, let them handle that. When it comes to issues of investigating ombudsman, let it go to the IGG. Then
reporting corruption to the State House
and Corruption Unit.
Investigation to the IGG.
Okay. Because then everyone will have a budget line to do their work. But now what happens is some cases of corruption will go to the IGG. Some cases will go to the DPP. Some cases will go to State House.
Yeah.
So in the end, you'll find that maybe one case has gone to 3 different agencies.
Okay.
Until these agencies get an opportunity to meet and discuss, they'll be discussing the same cases before they meet. So that means you're investing resources 3 times to work on one case. But also when it comes to the coverage, Uganda is big. And every time we have new administrative units. So when you have that more coordinated approach, it's easier to divide yourselves into this wider country. At least you know that we shall put our power here, we put our strength here, we put our... then it becomes more easy. At least let the presence of these anti-corruption agencies be felt in every corner of this country. Without that, I think we shall always be, rotating within the same vicious cycle.
Recently at the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, part of the discussions was African debt, and which is apparently $1.9 trillion. And that's very worrying. And you get to realize that it is due to the borrowed money is not used for the right reasons, and it all comes back to corruption. So I'm trying to understand, as we are looking at the integration of Africa, there is within it, there is regional integration. And we're seeing that our very region where we coexist has the worst scores, among the worst scores regions. So, and I believe in those countries, most especially the worst affected countries like Congo, Somalia, South Sudan, they have anti-corruption units in those countries. So how do we see ourselves having a way to have a joint kind of correlation within? Because we should stop thinking just beyond Uganda. It's not going to be the case 10 years from now.
When it comes to regionally, we have, how can I call it? I forget the name, but there is that, I wouldn't call it a coalition, but there is that engagement of heads of inspectorates within countries. Or we would call it, in the layman's language, the coordination of the inspector generals of government. Yeah. So there's that one. But then there is also a framework of under the Financial Intelligence Authority that mainly combats corruption. The East and South African Anti-Money Laundering Group. It's called ESAMDAG. So these are all mechanisms that have been put in place to discuss mainly issues on combating corruption. And of course, transnational
Are they effective?
crime. So far, most of the things are new. Our discussions on money laundering are, I think they are not older than 10 years.
Okay.
The discussion started about 2013, around then. So, but every time, I think we are improving. And when you ask of the effectiveness, you remember until of recent, Uganda was on the grey list of the financial...
last year.
The PATAF.
Exactly.
So, as much as we try to move away from that, realize that it's been a long way. We are putting in place a lot of mechanisms, a lot of systems, a lot of laws to ensure that there is sanity. But, when it comes to now countries within East Africa, I think the most stable economies are, we have Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. But the rest are unstable. When you look at South Sudan, when you look at DRC, when you look at Somalia, they are unstable. So with unstable economies in our region is that there is easiness to undertake illicit trade. So we see a lot of smuggling. There is piracy when it goes to Somalia. So now these elements have an effect when it comes to fighting corruption. But also the elements of illicit financial flows have an effect on how we use our resources as countries. So when it comes to the growing debt, which other element you are bringing across, is that we are in a situation where we can't fully utilize our resources. Because some countries that are performing better, it's likely that they have effectively utilized
their resources.
But Uganda, there are times when you reach and you're seeing lots of gold exports, but you don't see where this gold is coming from. Even within the taxman, they don't see, they don't see those tax revenues from this gold. And then the question comes, where does this gold come from? When you look at these other minerals we are mining and the rest, you question yourself, where are they coming from and where are they heading to?
Exactly.
Because even most of the operators that are mining most of these minerals, they are not, some of them either are licensed, but they are not registered.
Okay, they are licensed but not registered.
So some we call them small artisanal miners, but they are small artisanal miners that are using highly sophisticated equipment. Because an artisanal miner, you're basically supposed to be using hand tools. But these are guys that are using sophisticated. But they are not registered and still call themselves small
scale miners.
So we are in that situation. Now, what do we do? One, the agencies that are supposed to do that are under-resourced. They are uncoordinated. And we go back to the same problems. So with governments, you don't blame them, because when you don't have enough resources, of course, you have to borrow.
To borrow, absolutely.
And the question then comes, what is it that we use this money for?
I think we shall start from there. Let's first have this break. It's exactly 29 minutes with David Kizito, is the Programs Officer, Transparency International Uganda. Let's take this break. We return for further insights.
Smart24, driving business.
Luxury redefined at Seasand Hotel as you indulge in the splendor of elegant living fit for the royalty that you are. Step into comfort, pampering and blissful customer-centric service as you select from our range of comfy, exquisite living quarters furnished to meet with your royal preference. Surrounded by scenic beauty, our tropical setting allows you to escape the glamorous ordeal of city life. Our ambient green gardens will guide you to a place of revitalizing rest. The 3-star restaurant caters to your palate, serving your choice menu ranging from exotic cuisines to local delicacies. Our chefs will serve you full-course meals for a truly out-of-this-world culinary experience. Our fully stocked bar to whet your throat, from renowned global brand whisks, brandies, gins, beers and wines to our locally celebrated beverages, you will not lack for any brewage. It's an all-new experience in the East at Seasand Hotel. So visit today at plot 15 to 19 Spire Road, Ginger, or contact us on +256 751 719 960 and +256 785 354 614 for reservations. Seasand Hotels, luxury redefined.
This is Jordan. When it comes to classwork, Jordan is magic. Jordan shines. Jordan makes his peers better. Jordan is a true leader. White Star Magic family. Be a leader. Be magic.
Smart24, driving business.
Getting into the last minutes of this discussion, of course, taking a look at Uganda's corruption stagnation, where we are currently, as we are not changing for the last 3 years. Now, I'm still with David, is the programs officer, that is Transparency International Uganda. Now, you were still telling the viewers what is that money used for? Where does the money go? Before we went into the break.
When it comes to corruption, like we were discussing, of course, most of this money is supposed to be invested in public, it goes to public expenditure. So this includes our schools, our hospitals, our mighty roads. Our mighty roads. However, there is the current comparative statistics that we've seen out there.
Yeah.
That really revealed that probably our cost of public administration is at that alarming rate. And I think it's time it starts worrying all of us, especially us, the taxpayers, who will probably even have to pay, this debt burden that's increasing.
Yeah. There
was a study that showed that about 1 out of 5 our expenditure, is that a fifth of our expenditure is lost to corruption. So in simple terms, in every 10 million, you're very sure that 1 million will go to, that's actually 2 million will go to corruption in every 10 million. Or 5 million, 1 million will go to
corruption.
So that's one of those. but also looking at our current size. Every time we have these new administrative units, and we ask ourselves, what's the impact
of this
creating a district that is as big as a sub-county?
Okay.
Because when it comes to back in the days of the colonial rule, something we call bringing services closer to the people. Someone would sit in the UK and they were administering over 50 colonial states.
States, yeah.
And all these states were as effective as you could ever imagine. The transport system was working. The railway networks, you remember, were working all the way to Arua. The tax systems were working because everyone used to pay their share of the tax. We would say the best schools constructed. Actually, up to now, those traditional schools still rank, or they still compete favorably.
I agree.
Now, coming to this current regime, you're administering just a small country like Uganda, but you want over 130 districts.
Yeah.
What for? You have a size of about 500 members of parliament. But remember, this Uganda is almost still the same size. Because back in the days, we had about 60 or so members of parliament. But the level and quality of discussion then was so unprecedented than it is today. Even as much as we have these arguments over the population size and what, we've seen countries like India. They are probably big. The population size is bigger. But our representation when it comes to political leadership, it's smaller. But things are working. Because India is manufacturing, it's producing, now they're leading in medicine and
It's
things
actually
like that.
one of the countries to look out for in the global economy 2024.
It's working.
It's working.
So why is it that we want to have this bloated, let me borrow that word, bloated, public administration? And every time we have such systems, it becomes hard to control. You'll come into then the Auditor General's report. Because the public system is becoming too big, you reach a point when you can't control, your payroll.
Exactly.
So now we are struggling with issues of ghost
stuff.
Where over 60 billion annually is being lost. And when the Auditor General reports 60 billion, it means there is a bigger problem. Because they can't audit the entire system, but they just give you hints. They look into a certain sector and tell you, I think we have a problem.
Yes.
Now it's the government to clean up the entire mess. So when they tell you that about 1,000 ghost staff on the public payroll, that means that's on their sample size. So there is a bigger problem. So if you can afford to lose that much amount of money, this is taxpayers' money that would have been used for other things. That shows that we have a problem. The IGG's report, that was the cost of corruption in Uganda. It shows that we lose about 9 trillion. Between 9 to 10. But they were comparing between 10 to 20 trillion loss annually to corruption. So this amount of money, someone was in parliament, someone was putting it into, services. And they said that a fully equipped health center costs 5 billion Ugandan shillings. So that means if you get about 9.1 trillion,
yes,
that money could give you about 700 health centers in one financial year.
Okay.
And that's the money you lose every financial year.
So you lose 700 health centers?
You lose about 700 health centers every financial year to corruption. So meaning that if we can, restrict and limit on these financial hemorrhages in our systems, probably we would see better services. We would see better administration. We would see this country probably growing and developing at a higher rate than it is today. We've seen previously programs that are supposed to lift people out of poverty. Programs such as the Operation Wealth Creation. We've seen programs such as the Youth Livelihood Fund. We've seen programs such as Emyoga. But even up to now, when we go and try to evaluate the benefits from these programs, one key aspect that will come out will be corruption.
Corruption.
Either the
Absolutely.
teams that applied for these monies didn't get as much as they requested for,
Yeah.
or maybe the process through which the monies were rewarded were not as good as they should be. Maybe there's a lot of patronage when it comes to who qualifies to get the money and who doesn't. So all these factors, when you put them into play, also the PDM has the same problem. The recruitments of the parish chiefs. You remember, I think we saw stories about those. How people were paying monies to get recruited. But you know, this is a low-paying job. Why should you pay so much, you know, to become a parish chief? And people are paying as much as 5 million Ugandan shillings. So that means the moment you get into office, your next thing is to recover the money. And even up to now, we are seeing PDM now struggling with elements of corruption. Either circles are getting less, you know, circles are investing in wrong enterprises. And you know, these enterprises are approved. So if someone approves a wrong enterprise, that means there is some elements, or there is some, you know, there is something behind the scenes that we don't know. So
actually, that points me out to part of the key factors leading to corruption in local government. You know, the aspects of nepotism, and there was the IGG had inquired on the Parliament changing the Act. That is, I think, Article 54, which gives local government leaders power, because you mentioned about selling jobs. There has been also issues of sexual harassment. And these are the people that are covering up for the big, what they call the big fish. Has Transparency International Uganda, how are you working together to see that as such? The Act is changed, whereby the local leaders, the chairpersons, are limited in terms of powers, because they nominate people. They nominate their own children, they nominate their campaign managers, and many more. And that is related to corruption.
No, at local government level, there are so many problems, and one of those is the monitoring systems.
Monitoring systems
is weak.
Okay.
But when it comes specifically to issues of recruitment, one of their key challenges was that, apart from the chairperson, district service commission, the rest are more like, I wouldn't call them volunteers, but they just get allowances. When someone is operating with such a contract, you know, security of tenure is not, you know, very secure. That means they also want to gain as much. So one of the recommendations was that probably it's time to give them contracts, and maybe give them contracts. So that with this contract, it comes with certain, what do we call it, them standing orders, some guidelines
of how they're supposed to
execute their mandate, something that would control their integrity. I forget that word. So without that, it becomes hard. Some local governments were requesting for the recruitment to be pushed back to the center, to the public service. However, you know, there are also those delays, because public service, then you'll put them at a task of recruiting, you know, so many people up to the lowest local unit. And for us, we think that can't solve the problem. Because when they brought in decentralization, the spirit was that power was supposed to be at these lower units.
Okay.
Because if you want to do micromanagement, it becomes a challenge. You can't be everywhere.
Yes.
So what is supposed to be done at central government is mainly coordinate, but let the power be centered at the local level. So their main challenge are that the monitoring systems are weak. So that gives, you know, the leaders leeway to do as they wish. And I think that's why they are also complaining about URA's move now to take over, you know, revenue collection at that level. Because back then, they used to under-declare revenue. Then when URA went in, they started realizing more money. Then they were like, but you are telling us, you know, there is less money. Where is this more coming from? So those elements come into plan. For us, we think there are bigger challenges there that we need to fix.
Okay.
But not at the central level. Because when we re-centralize, it will be very hard to micromanage all these programs.
So when do we hope this can get into effect of limiting the powers of these local leaders?
Of course, if systems are to work, They have the district public accounts committee. Unfortunately, they are still weak.
Okay.
But also, the role of whistleblowers should be enhanced. If you think there is nepotism and a chairman is recruiting his own, then you should whistleblow. Only that there is, I think this is a fact, that in some of these areas, there are also, I think, jobs whose qualifications people are also not interested.
Yes.
One of those will be district engineers. You'll note that most of the districts, they used to find it hard to attract engineers. Why? The requirements are high, yet the salary is very low. So most guys would rather, tap out and leave it at that. Then some districts also would prefer to, recruit their own.
Okay.
And this is happening. I don't know why people think, a Ugandan from Bale shouldn't qualify
to work in another district.
Nakasongola.
Not exactly.
I don't know why it is that case. You recruit teachers in a different district and they tell you we want teachers from our own communities. Yet they are all serving Ugandans and they are all Ugandans. So when communities have this perspective in their mind and they are recruiting their own, then it has always become an issue of contention within these districts. It's still a long way to go, but I think Uganda Local Governments Association is doing something about it. CSOs for us, we always do our monitoring mandate and we always make presentations during the budget conferences. And every time we have an opportunity to have these community barazas, scenarios where we've had these reports coming to us, we always follow up. Although some reports don't come with evidence, so sometimes you can't act. Okay.
Now, recently we have the rationalization of government agencies, merger, and when I look at this, it sounds good in terms of reducing costs. And one of the ways, probably because of having too many units, it's one of the ways why there is corruption. Now, I want to understand. Okay, you've merged these agencies, but then the districts are still scattered. There is still much more work, monotonous for them to execute. How sure are we that actually that could, in some sort of a way, hinder corruption? And do you really think even merging these agencies can be a means of combating corruption? Does it add up?
So the discussion of mergers has been going on for, I think, a while. It was actually supposed to be implemented in the current national development plan.
Exactly.
However, I think there is also who should be merged, who shouldn't be merged. And for us, we think the mergers are necessary. Like the example I gave you, if we are all fighting corruption,
yes,
why shouldn't we be one unit? And then every department performs their mandate. Like I said, maybe the office of the DEI then takes on capacity building, so that we don't have capacity building in the Inspectorate of Government. Then maybe the anti-corruption unit of the State House takes on receiving calls, reports on corruption, so that then one caller or one whistleblower doesn't report the same case to more than 5 agencies, and we spend resources on that. So the beauty of mergers is that, you limit on the duplication, you limit on, performing the same thing.
Exactly.
But also everyone's terms of engagement are very clear. You won't have that overlapping mandate.
Yeah.
However, coming into this current financial year, I think there was a request by the Minister of Public Service to have about 79 billion. It was about 79 billion, to support, the merger to move. And one of these requests was that, since so many staffs are going to lose their jobs, we need to compensate them and things like that.
But they were saying there is no money for them. As a reporter,
no, that's what I'm coming to. We have people that operate, actually most of these agencies, most of these people operate on contracts.
Okay.
So that means if your contract has ended, I'm not obliged to give you terminal benefits.
Okay, yes.
You get it? Because in the course of me employing you, I pay your NSSF. I give you insurance to a certain term. So when we part ways, let the NSSF your national social security fund, be your terminal benefit, even as much as you won't realize it immediately.
Yes.
But at least I've covered you ahead. So when you come and make this obscene request of 79 billion to compensate for terminal benefits, I think it loses meaning. For us, the beauty of the mergers is that we would want to see more efficiency.
Yes.
We would want to see more. Less duplication. We would want to see that one entity is doing all the work that is supposed to do. So there are agencies, for example, I remember Equal Opportunities and Uganda Human Rights. The argument was that the mandate is more or less the same.
The same.
Why should you have this one there, the other one here? Let them be
one.
merged. Then UNRWA and Ministry of Works, they are saying probably it should be maybe a department.
UNRWA should be a department within the ministry.
Ministry of Works. Because you're all doing works. You get
That's at the Ministry of Agriculture.
So that if they are appropriating money, they appropriate it to the ministry, then the ministry is what's going to do with. Other than receiving, then UNRWA also has a vote on its own. You know, when you have so many of these votes, there's a lot of uncoordination. Even when it comes to now fighting corruption, you know, the Auditor General has now so many books to check. Yet they would have checked just one book. But you know, for corruption to occur, you know, when the surface, I forget that word in physics.
The surface of...
surface layer, something.
I wasn't very bad.
Yeah. So when you get when you spread out these agencies, you're increasing on the burden for the monitors to monitor and evaluate. So someone has to run to finance, they have to run to URA, they have to run to URSP. Yet if something is merged within Ministry of Finance, then all your guns will be pointed to one agency. So if there are chances of resource misuse, it's very unlikely that, you know, all this one agency will misappropriate as much resources as 10 agencies would have misappropriated. So for us, we think in merging, we shall reduce on that that ability to spread the risk.
Okay. Well, very interesting. Thanks a lot, David, for that interaction. And thanks for being part of the show today. Corruption, that's been the discussion of the day. Uganda stagnating at 26%, which is the score. Well, wish you a productive day and go set no strategies to see how you can prosper in your business. Till tomorrow. Good morning.